Well, as we continue Lent, this time before Easter, we keep hearing these stories that are based on the 7 last words, the things that Jesus said at different places in the Bible when he was on the cross. And we've talked about these in different contexts, and today I want to actually talk a little bit about the actual cross. You know, because this is something you see all around. How many people are wearing a cross right now? Yeah, quite a few. We put them on jewelry. You can buy them in Walmart. They're on steeples. There's this one up here. And if you think about it, at the time of Jesus, nobody would have imagined that you'd put a cross up in a place where people could see it. Nobody would have thought of it as something to celebrate. It would have been like putting a hangman's noose as a symbol of your religion. Everywhere you look. It was actually hundreds of years before Christians started to use crosses as a symbol, because for a long time, the memory of just how terrible it was to be put on a cross was just too vivid. People didn't want to be around it. And it wasn't until crucifixion was made illegal because of Christianity that it became a symbol that we use. And so when you talk about Jesus going to the cross and dying for our sins, that was something that our guest mentioned. She said, he died for my sins. He paid the price. And if you think about that, one of the questions that comes up is, how is that fair? How is that in any way even good? Why is it that God would decide to pick one person and dump everything on that one person and put one person through all this suffering and pain so that we don't have to? One person said the way they talk about it, it makes it sound like child abuse. Take one of your kids. Imagine if you had a parent with 10 kids, and when the first son did something wrong, they went to the youngest and went whack. And when the oldest daughter went and did something wrong, went to the youngest kid and went whack. You know? That's the way it sounds sometimes. He paid the price. He took on the punishment for our sins. And you can get that idea maybe. So I want to talk a little bit about what was really going on. Because there's more to it than that. There's something else going on here. And what's going on, it shows up in the passage from John. And it's a passage that comes at the Last Supper. Right before Jesus goes to the cross, right before he goes to die. This is where he sees, he talks to his disciples and is explaining to them. In all the other Gospels, they have the Last Supper. In John, there's no Last Supper. Jesus gives them this long discussion. He explains stuff to them. And one of the things he says, Philip, one of his disciples, says, Lord, show us the Father, and we shall be satisfied. And Jesus said to him, have I been with you so long, and yet you don't know me, Philip? Whoever has seen me has seen the Father. So how can you say, show us the Father? Don't you believe that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me? So Jesus says, if you see him, you see the Father. You see God. That's a strange thing to say. It's a strange thing to hear. But it's at the center of what we're doing here. It's why we have crosses here. It's why it's something we can celebrate. It's why it's not just God picking on one person. See, what we say about Jesus is that Jesus came into the world not just to be a person to take on some of our punishment, But that Jesus came into the world to be what they say back in he's born, it says he will be Emmanuel, which means God with us. Jesus is in the world to be God with us. So when Jesus goes to the cross, it isn't God pointing at one of his creations and saying, you're taking on this whole burden. It's God taking on that burden for us. When Jesus says, if you see me, you see the Father. If you see me, you see God face to face. He really meant it. It means that everything that Jesus went through was part of what God went through. That's kind of a mind-blowing concept, but it's what makes what we do here different from every other religion, different from every other kind of way of getting to God. Because all the other religions spend a lot of time talking about how to get to God. Christians say God came to us. Not just in a visit, but actually lived like us. Lived this life just like we have and went through all the experiences we had. Now maybe that doesn't come together logically very well. You're right. And yet it's a statement of what God was willing to do. How far God was willing to go to come to know us. And out of all of that, this passage, this word, my God, why have you forsaken me, captures just how much of a sacrifice Jesus made. Just how far God was willing to come into our lives. You know, because we talk about sacrifice, we talk about giving up things, we talk about people who give their lives. Giving your life, dying for a cause, is not the most difficult thing there is to do. Every day, people are giving their lives for their family, for their country, for their friends, for things they believe in. People die for causes all the time. One of the things that brought people to Christianity, even still, is the fact that there were people who, if they had to choose between turning away from Jesus and dying, they choose dying because they believed so strongly that Jesus was carrying them through. That got people's attention. But there's something much harder than dying for a cause. And that's going through pain or suffering without feeling like there's a cause. It's looking at whatever you're going through and wondering, why in the world is this happening to me? It's looking at whatever you're going through and saying, there's no purpose to this. That's when people really suffer. And you don't have to die. You don't have to even be going through that much suffering to be really torn up when you don't know why. To go through that pain, anything. If you can come up with a reason for it, if you can feel like it serves a higher purpose, that makes almost anything tolerable. It's when you can't do that. It's when you look and say, God, where are you? That's when you suffer. And in this passage, in this statement from Jesus, we learn that Jesus even went through that. That there on that cross, even having God with him, even being so close to God, so close to the Father, that when you looked at Jesus, you looked at the Father, even then, he stopped and said, my God, why have you forsaken me?